to the August 15th Poverty and Homelessness Board meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting, and let's begin with introductions. Can we start with Dave and Diana down there?
Dave Haverland with the United States Department of Veterans Affairs.
Sean Murphy with Laurel Hill Center.
Susan Lopez with DHS Child Welfare.
Sean Van Gordon, Springfield City Council.
Cliff Harold, Sheriff.
Pat Walsh with Vox Public Relations.
Dan Bryant, Faith Organizations.
Steve Manella, Lane County Human Services.
Rick Kincaid, Community Health Centers, Lane County.
Chris McAllister, consumer, homeless, former homeless adult.
Amanda Borda, Lane County Human Services.
Ashley Espinoza, Sector Strategy Director with Lane Workforce Partnership.
Bob Surins, Human Services, Lane County.
Stephanie Jennings, City of Eugene staff.
Noreen Tunnels with United Way representing philanthropy. Cheryl Balthrop, representing Virgin Shelters.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the meeting, the minutes, there we go, from our last meeting? And also, we can probably take a look at the consent agenda. If there's any changes to the minutes?
Excuse me. Sorry. I did mention this to Diana. I was not present at the last meeting, so I wasn't listed as present or absent. I was absent. Just an addition.
We'll add that to the minutes. Do we need to make a motion on that? If not, can we accept the meetings with the minutes with the one amendment?
I move to approve.
Thanks. Second.
Second.
Great, thanks. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Same sign? Great, well, that passes. How about the consent agenda? Has everyone had a chance to take a look at items on that? Any questions? If not, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion to approve.
And a second, Chris. All in favor to accept the consent agenda?
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Anybody opposed? No, great, thank you. Well, we're cooking along. Let's move into committee updates. Let's start with Dave.
The membership committee met and has one new recommendation to the board to appoint Brent Waz, Father Brent Waz, to the faith-based organization representative.
All right. Anybody else, anybody in the committee want to make any other comments? Thoughts? It's a great interview. Okay, then why don't we talk about what's before we make the motion? Why don't you talk about what's next with our next person? Because we're going to meet again. We had two openings.
As far as the youth appointment, we'll have to schedule a new phone or in-person interview in the future.
Right.
Be arranged at a later date.
Okay. Yeah, we had two people we were supposed to interview today, and one couldn't make it. So anyway, but you want to make a motion to accept Father Waz as the new faith-based community?
Does that become effective immediately or with the next meeting?
After you finish your sandwich.
You can have the other half of my sandwich.
Finish the sandwich.
What, pardon me?
Next meeting.
For what? When Brent, Brent will be on at the next meeting. His name has to go before the county commission.
Okay, I was going to say, is there a bio or some kind of information that was shared?
It was with the committee,
Okay.
but it did not go out to the rest of the group.
I don't remember, maybe
Some brief, I can give some brief information. Father has worked in nonprofit sector, in particular addressing homelessness, as well as with the faith-based community. He is the father of Resurrection Church. He's in the room, so I could actually let him introduce himself, but I won't. I'll continue. Resurrection Church had the first Conestoga hut on its property in the city, and now they have a tiny house where they house families. Four tiny homes. And Father Waz was a founding board member of Opportunity Village.
Thank you.
And he's a decent guy.
Vouch for him?
I vouch for him.
Oh, well, that's good enough for me. make a motion to,
I'd like to move that we accept Father Waz to the PHP.
Second?
okay, all in favor? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I would just clarify, because she reminded me that it doesn't become official until the county commissioners approve it, just so that we're all on.
Right.
This recommendation to the county
I'd like to make the
board.
recommendation that we accept Father Waz to the Poverty and Homelessness Board effective upon commission approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Welcome. The hazing's not quite over, but it'll continue, I think, in another few weeks. Anyway, thanks. Go ahead. The other thing I'd like to do before we get too far into this is welcome our new members to the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Ashley Espinoza, who joins us from Lane Workforce Partnership, and our new sheriff, Sheriff Harold. So thank you for being here, and we're glad you're here. So anything else, Dave? So we, like I guess what you said earlier, Dave, we'll interview our candidate for the youth spot here in the next few weeks. Okay, so we'll have another one to vote on probably at our next meeting. Let's see. The homeless representative, is Paul here from Correctional Services? If not, let's go to the Employment Committee, Dave.
All right, so on behalf of the Employment Committee, on 8/9/2019, the Employment Subcommittee met at the Oregon Employment Department's Dexter Room. County staff Deanna Strachan-Wilson and Craig Wilson gave a presentation of their lived experience in developing and maintaining a supported employment model. Subcommittee members present asked numerous questions, and answers that Deanna and Craig were able to provide strengthened the members' awareness of this model. Pursuing supported employment opportunities within the local workforce will remain a focus of the committee. The committee's next meeting will include a tour of local nonprofits providing supported employment services, and a Chamber of Commerce survey of business interests and awareness of the supported employment model has been discussed. I'd like to thank the county staff, to include Cindy, Deanna, and Craig, and all the members of the committee for their hard work and open communication surrounding this notion of supported employment in the community.
Any questions for Dave or comments? Appreciate the good work the group is doing, for sure. Anything? All right. If not, Susan is up here with Youth Homeless Solutions Work Group.
We've met several times. We've been working really hard, and we have finally completed our needs assessment. We were hoping to be able to present that today, but we're going to do that next month instead, in September. So we'll have members of the Youth Action Council present to present that to you all as well. We have not heard back from our YHDP application yet. Today is the deadline, I believe. So we don't know if no news is good news. We're hoping. We're going to be optimistic. And we're looking forward to sharing with you all some of the perspectives that we have. We looked at the youth pit count preliminary information around 145 homeless youth in Lane County in January, which is probably the lowest point in our community because it's the coldest time of the year. And when we looked at our array of services to provide for these youth, there are about 20 beds for that demand. So we are, just kind of give you a spoiler, for next week, we're pretty grossly under-prepared to meet the youth homeless needs in our community. So we'll be talking about that more next week.
Can you go back and talk a little bit about what you're waiting on in terms of the program, or we've applied for? Do you want to talk about that?
Grant.
The grant.
Oh, the grant?
Yes.
Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. So Alex can probably give a much better, concise explanation. It was a very involved, very lengthy application process with multiple community partners. So it's a demonstration project that kind of relaxes federal rules around how to use money in order to make services that work in individual communities.
Yes, it was our second time applying for this HUD grant, the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, and we applied to be selected as a community to develop a specific plan to address youth homelessness, and that award would be $1 million or more. So I'm just compulsively checking my email to see if we got it.
Good. Questions?
Make a comment. Actually being part of the point-in-time count this past year, I was out in Fern Ridge and talking with folks at Midland Cares and hearing from them that just in Fern Ridge, Elmira and Veneta, there are about 27 youth who are experiencing homelessness. And of course, I didn't see them, but your point is well taken that January, you're not probably going to find folks. So, I don't know that there's ever an opportunity for us to think about, I know that HUD is directive about the timing, but is there another opportunity at some point for us to think about, could we do sort of a modified point in time that would give us maybe a better capture?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that has been, through the research, has been proven to be successful for youth specifically. Looking at springtime, I think it was springtime that we were specifically thinking about potentially adding a second youth pick count in our community that necessarily wouldn't involve all of the same processes, but it might give us a better picture of the true number of homeless youth or unaccompanied or housing insecure youth in our community.
Thank you for pursuing this effort. Lane County has a long history of trying to engage homeless youth, and so this pilot project is just another step in that ladder, and hopefully we can be supportive.
Any other questions for Susan? Good work, thank you. If not, on your agenda, it says that Chris will have an HMIS Evaluation Committee report, and that's actually not right. He's going to talk about League today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. League is currently, as of today, accepting applications for new members. We are hoping to have 3 to 5 members join us, and we are hoping to have a robust application process where we're reaching out to people. We need people in rural communities. We need people who are in positions that are not currently represented on our decision making. Or do we have people in camps that are not represented? Do we have people in positions of homelessness that are not spoken to? How can we fix the item if we don't hear the voice? And so we really implore people, if you have a distance issue, let us know that you're interested. We can try and find workarounds. We want your voice. If there's a group that needs to have League members come explain what we do, reach out to us. Myself, you can get my information from Diana or Amanda Borda with the county. We really need voices to come and apply and be part of the decision making. League is a very detail-focused but experience-based group. We've been able to recently help out with HMIS by giving a review on the wording of the privacy documents and the informed consent policies, because it needs to be understood by the people filling it out. It needs to be understood by the people who are seeking services and not intimidating. So this is why League is important. We need to be able to have the voice actually reflect the need. And so I just wanted to say we're working on our state of homelessness report, which should be on the agenda next month, where the lived experience shares where we are and where we want to go and how we can do better in making that happen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Chris, would you, since we have several new people, say just a word about who League is,
Okay.
what your...
Thank you, sir. Lived Experience Advisory Group for Unhoused Engagement. It is a 100% homeless, former homeless body within the PHB that advises on homeless items. It is a advisory group, so therefore it does not have decision-making powers, but we do maintain our own work plan, and we do show supports and help out other community members with projects, with ideas, or with formats. We also take part in the consumer feedback process for our continuum of care partners. So we meet without staff to listen to how the experiences are of those who receive services from our providers. And then we give feedback that is then put in part of their evaluation. Did they respond? Are things going okay? Did it meet the goals of the program? Things like that. Did that answer your question, sir?
Thank you.
Good. Any questions for Chris? I mean, good work, Chris, thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Dr. Kincaid, the Healthcare Work Group.
The Healthcare Work Group met last on the 31st of July. work has taken a little deeper dive into two main areas. That around care coordination, particularly discharge management from hospitals, where we've struggled to be able to place people who are homeless in sort of step-down facilities or into transitional care environments due to their homelessness, and also some of the other issues that may accompany that patient population. So we've taken a little bit more time to sort of look at that in a little bit more detail and try to understand what we have available in the community and where those gaps are. So we've brought together the teams and the primary nonprofits within the community that service that population and are looking at several options that we will present as part of our series of recommendations from the healthcare work group. The second area that we've been doing sort of a little bit deeper dive again in is that of respite care and really the care coordination that's involved in respite care. So we've people tracking folks over time and knowing where services are being applied and by whom and how requires coordination across different entities that we really don't have that ability to have that seamless coordination at this point. So we're looking at several different options to be able to help track patients as they move through the different potential venues and then provide coordinated care for those patients that's proportional to the need that they would have. So we had hoped to have a report for this meeting, but because we've needed to take a little bit deeper dive in some of those areas, we will likely be bringing back our formal recommendations at a subsequent meeting based on agenda timing.
Great. Dan?
Dr. Do you know what percentage or how many people in the fused list are there solely because of medical issues? Do we have any clue in that?
I really can't give you the specifics. I would say a very small percentage are there solely because of purely medical issues. Population that we serve within that has other significant issues, from whether it be substance use, other challenges related to kind of their environment. So we can certainly bring that data to you, but that population is really looking at multiple venues of where they're connected into, whether it's the criminal justice system, whether it's in other areas. So that activates that system.
Not for the Fuse project, but in general, we looked recently at the Trillium hotspotter list. So Trillium serves currently over 90,000 patients on OHP, and so we were looking for folks who we looked at the Trillium list against the point in time count, not the entire HMIS that we have with everybody who has been served, because we're in the process of bringing our HMIS here locally so that we can better analyze our data. But we looked at the folks in the PIT count, and that narrowed down to 1,049 individuals. And of those individuals, we looked at sheltered and unsheltered. 50% of those 1,049, it was indicated that they had SPMI, mental health issues, and then a percentage of those also had both mental health and chronic health conditions. There's a category of SPMI only. There's a category of chronic health conditions only. So we can bring back that kind of data to share.
You had shared with me a while back the top 10 users or something that we were spending over $50,000 on, and
well, that was part of that. That was part of that analysis, because we had. It turns out that we have 10 users that are sheltered. They're not part of the unsheltered population. That are the cost is over $53,000 a year.
I would just be interested in more of that kind of data.
Right.
hopefully we'll be able to bring you a little bit more data as we really look at the population and the cost of population. The largest driver of healthcare cost actually is their housing status.
Right.
So when we see by many times the cost. So clearly one of the most significant interventions from a medical standpoint will be housing. So, and I think as we look at this work, we're trying to figure out what type of environment creates the stability. And I think that that's where the understanding the nuances of the population and the services that you have to provide for that population to keep them stable, that's where I think we'll get the most bang for the buck, so to speak.
And part of my interest is purely an anecdotal kind of working with a couple of different individuals that I see that it's solely just a medical issue. And I see them in the hospital 2 or 3 times a month, often several times, and I just think of the cost of that. And and I don't know how widespread that is, but with those particular individuals.
And I think that's where we're trying to speak to sort of medical respite and really try to understand, well, how is it that you create enough stability in their environment to actually get them to a place of medical stability? Because oftentimes they're discharged from the hospital and they're clearly not better, so, or to the point where they can be independent. And I think that that's the piece that we're trying to figure out, how we are able to carry that population. And then even once they're stable from that, they still require ongoing services. So it's not as if you can then cast folks out to the street, so to speak, at that point. So
Sean, and then Sean.
So it's anecdotally, because we do Fuse and we have a little medical respite thing with Peace Health. And most of the folks that we get from Peace Health for medical have no connection to Fuse. They're folks who are homeless, have high medical issues, a lot who are in a gap where they're ill, they're not ill enough to go to respite or hospice, those kind of services, but there's nowhere for them to go in between. And so then they keep going back and forth to the hospital when you see folks who are homeless and purely medical. And then with Fuse, you kind of have a combination of some folks with all three: mental illness, substance use, and they may or may not have a chronic medical condition.
And criminal justice involved.
Yes, yeah.
Sean?
So, Doctor, this works really good. Where I would, I guess, this was always sort of nuanced work, right? Because if we get it right, what we're going to do is free up resources that we can invest in housing, and that's really the critical point. The word of, I guess, caution that I would have would be to continue to look at it with that clinician's eye, right? Because there's people that are high users that the reality is they're just going to be high users based on what their actual medical condition is. And then, right, and so like being able to support sort out the people we can actually impact from a cost perspective becomes really important. And I think the other critical thing from what I understand in the literature is that when you work on populations like this, we could actually see their medical expense begin to rise as we get them into a stable case. And I'm kind of curious for you to comment or have an opinion on what your opinion on this is, that their medical costs could rise, stabilize, and then drop in like the 2-year window as they get into a more stable place medically.
yeah, you're absolutely correct. The cost of can go up significantly, particularly in areas where they may have not been receiving the right level of services. So particularly on the behavioral health side or substance use treatment, those costs will go up, but the long-term sort of return on that investment is longer term. It's not going to be that immediate piece. And I think that's one of the things we struggle with our payment systems and things like that, is we're very short term. So because we have a budget for a year, and so we're really not thinking about what that budget's going to look like 5 to 10 years down the path. So I think that you're absolutely correct, but it's those types of investments in a community, because the community, again, is going to bear the long-term potential cost of that work. And so you're really you're investing in your community, and the community's resources are going to have to come to bear over time. So you're absolutely correct. And I think our hope is to provide some information in our set of recommendations that will have both short-term implications, and then really what are sort of our long-term investments that we would be making in the healthcare system, but also particularly in the places in between the healthcare system, and how would we most appropriately make those investments to try to minimize the downstream impact of their medical conditions over time.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Kincaid? If not, thank you. We look forward to more information down the line. Thank you. All right. Our next agenda item is Continuum of Care Program Grant Application and Project Ranking. This is going to require some action on our part. Amanda is up. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. So I'm passing around a handout, so I'll just wait till everyone has that quickly. And then I'll have a second handout. So yes, we have a couple of decisions that we need from this board today regarding our continuum of care application that we're very diligently working on right now. We're deep in writing the narrative for that. It's due at the end of September, and we plan to submit that September 27th. For now, we need, I'll be looking for a motion to approve our final ranking, which is sort of half of that application that we have to submit. And I'll go through that right now, and then a motion to approve Lane County submitting that application on behalf of the continuum. So you have there in your handout, I'm giving kind of an update based on the RFP Eval HMIS committee and their work. So on August 9th, they met to determine the final ranking that we have to submit as part of our application. You can see there the summary of guidance from the NOFA. I won't go through that in full detail. I think this group is somewhat familiar. The new members can feel free to take a look and ask any questions that you might have. Basically, for that continuum of care application, we're required to rank all of our new and renewal projects in 2 tiers, provided that there might not be enough funding to fund all projects. HUD essentially wants to know in what order we would like to fund our projects. And so tier 1 is equal to 94% of our combined annual renewal demand, which is the amount that it would take to fund all of our renewals. And then tier 2 is the difference between that amount and our full amount needed, and plus any bonus amount that's available. And you can see the amounts there at the bottom, so those are fixed, determined amounts by HUD. And then essentially once something is placed in tier 2, HUD would score them based on their scoring criteria. It's 50 points directly related to our COC application score, 10 points for low barrier, and then 40 additional points based on position and rank within the tier 2 and how many projects are in tier 2. So that's a calculation that they use to get those points. Questions about that so far? So on the back, the second page there, the group also reviewed in that process the new projects that we would submit as part of that bonus funding that we had available. And so we had $175,380 available to allocate. We put out an RFA for expanding existing projects, which we discussed at the last executive committee meeting. We received, how many? 5 applications for expansion. And so the group reviewed all of those applications and determined amounts that we could award. They were really looking to award at least some amount from all of them, so some were reduced from the amount that was requested. So for HMIS expansion, $64,304. Expanding Homes for Good consolidated, their consolidated grant to add additional FTE. CAMIS, Permanent Supportive Housing, to expand by a peer support specialist, half FTE. Cascades Rapid Rehousing to increase case management, and then Mackenzie Rapid Rehousing also to increase supportive services. So all of those are just additional bonus funds that we will submit within the application. So that would be new money to our continuum. We did not have any amount available for reallocation this year. Last year we had some amount available. This year there was not anything that was reallocated. We did receive a notification from St. Vincent de Paul Connections that they're interested in potentially reallocating the Connections project. Potentially next year, provided more consultation with HUD and with the continuum, so I think that's a further discussion to have. And did you want to say something about that?
That's a very complex issue, as we have discussed.
So not final.
Until I have a conversation with HUD, it remains up in the air.
Yes. So just giving you disclosure on where we're at with that, but that is definitely just still pending, not final. The additional amount available for new projects was for domestic violence bonus projects. We did put the opportunity in the RFA to expand existing projects to provide domestic violence services within those. We did not receive any application for that. And the committee reviewed sort of all the other options for submitting applications. We did have one that we were able to submit from Lane County that we had from the previous year, and we reviewed that as an option. And unfortunately, that one is not really a viable application this current year. That would be through Lane County with subrecipient Women's Space. We recently had monitoring of Women's Space, and there were some findings there, and then we also are providing some technical assistance to them. They had some major staffing changes and had some trouble meeting their management qualifications for contracting with Lane County, so there were just some concerns around submitting that and having them receive federal funds at this particular time. Although we do recognize that DV services is a gap that we need to fill, and it's not meeting the full need, and so we do want to look at options over the next year of how we can have a community conversation around that, so that we're better prepared to apply for these opportunities and have the capacity to do that. So we are not submitting for the DV bonus through this opportunity. Are there questions about the new projects that were selected to be submitted? So then moving on to the renewal projects and ranking.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Did we reach out to SOS around domestic violence as well? So was the outreach in Florida?
When we didn't put out the full RFP this time, and it was only for existing, so they don't receive continuum funds, but we did reach out to them last year when it was the initial opportunity, and they did not submit an application.
Okay. Sorry.
Any other questions for Amanda on this part of things? No?
So the next part is the renewal projects. We conducted our evaluation several months ago of all of our continuum of care funded projects. And in completing the final ranking, the committee reviewed essentially the results from that evaluation, as well as several years of scores on performance and evaluation. And so with that, they had a good discussion and determined a ranking for that Tier 1, Tier 2 process, and you have that in your second handout there. And the scenario that they decided to go with was renewals and looking at 2 years average of performance, followed by the new bonus projects in the order that they're listed there. So pretty straightforward this year. There wasn't anything sort of moved around or anything like that. HUD really recommends that all projects be evaluated and ranked objectively and based on performance criteria, effectiveness, and that sort of thing. So if there are questions about that, let me know. Otherwise, we would be looking for a motion to approve this ranking to submit.
Any,
Just had a question about ranking 11. You have connections, the red one in between.
Yeah, so essentially the tier amounts are fixed amounts, and so if a project falls on the line where it would straddle, it essentially gets separated into Tier 1 and Tier 2. And if HUD decides to fund the Tier 1 portion, they would then move to score the second portion of it in Tier 2 based on their Tier 2 scoring. If that does not get funded, they would essentially check to see if the project is still viable with the Tier 1 amount. And if not, they might not award it. So it's essentially a straddling project, as they call it.
Basically means connections is at risk.
Yeah, so anything in Tier 2 is at risk.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Seriously at risk. And we are basically confronted with a Hobson's choice.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've participated in this in the past. I realize the difficulty with it, and is what it is. There's not much you can do.
It is challenging. Something will always fall into Tier 2. We have been awarded projects that are in Tier 2 in the past few years, Connections being one of them. And so it's not, essentially that it will be not awarded, it's just it is at risk and something always will be. The new projects were put at the bottom this year. Last year, some of those were put in Tier 1, which pushes some renewals down. So the committee really had a good discussion about whether to put those above existing renewals or put those at the bottom, because that's new funding, so it's not risking existing resources by putting those at the bottom.
Chris?
Mr. Chair, Amanda, can you please explain what the HMIS expansion portion in the new projects is?
Sure. The HMIS expansion is essentially for additional staffing support for HMIS that would provide a lot more training, technical assistance to users, especially given our new implementation that we're moving towards our own local implementation. There will be more training needs and staffing needs for HMIS. So.
And that's required for HUD, for our continuum care, and for some of our other allocations, is that correct?
Yeah, there's a higher demand for HMIS support. There's a lot more reporting that we have to do ongoing year to year. It's a lot more of a task than it once was, and so it does require a significant amount of staff. And we also expand programs, expand users every single year, and so having really minimal staff doesn't allow them to really support those users and provide the adequate training so that we have good data quality, and are able to provide the right data that we need to make our case for more resources. So it is pretty important to make sure that's staffed.
Maybe a question for Ann. Is the Connections program what First Congregational Church is planning to use in the two houses that they're building?
Correct. So we are not at risk for the upcoming year because that contract has been executed.
Okay, good.
So I have some philosophical issues with the continuum itself that are going to have to get resolved. I also need to have some conversations with HUD about what my options are. And until I have the conversation with HUD, I will not be having additional conversations with Amanda. But we will have some kind of resolution so that we can celebrate those units.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and let's just hope all Tier 2 gets funded, but yeah.
Yeah.
We need a motion.
I would like a motion to approve the ranking and approve us submitting our COC application on behalf of the continuum.
I would so move.
Second? Second. Dr. Kincaid seconds. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Thank you. Thank you to the committee for some hard work and difficult choices. Appreciate that. Okay. We'll move on here. Alex is going to talk a little bit about, the strategic planning process and what our next steps are. As you know, last month we had a really good conversation about our strategic plan and how it needs to realign with certainly the TAC report and other things that are going on. And so Amanda's going to talk a little bit about that, so I hope we have another good conversation that will lead to some steps. So go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. So we do have a strategic planning committee, and the strategic planning committee identified a need to, first of all, amend our existing Poverty and Homelessness Board strategic plan, which is a living document. It's meant to work for us, so we need to amend it, make sure it works for us, as well as align the existing priorities and actions, incorporating new information that we've received, including the recommendations from the Public Shelter Feasibility Study by TAC, the upcoming Community Needs Assessment, and the work of subcommittees. Also with the understanding that our existing strategic plan was created in 2016, goes through 2021. It's a 5-year plan and we have limited time left. So part of the discussion is what will we prioritize as we wrap up this existing plan. The goal is, of course, to clarify the vision and direction of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, aligning the strategic plan with our overall community work. The proposal is that the executive committee will lead this strategic planning process and move it forward. So the next executive committee meeting is October 17th, and at that meeting, it will be a strategic planning discussion to pull out strategies that are most important that we think can be accomplished with the remaining time of the existing strategic plan. At the October 17th Executive Committee meeting, the Executive Committee will discuss prioritization for these existing strategies, how we can be flexible, make the plan work for us, discuss which strategies are working, which ones we have made significant progress on, what we can still make progress on through 2021. Then the proposal is to send this prioritization to the subcommittees, have them select which items they would like to be responsible for and prioritize through the end of the strategic plan timeline. Subcommittees will determine the items they're responsible for and interested in working on between October, turn in their items by January, and this way subcommittees can maintain their own individualized work plans. Many of them have their own specific work plans that do tie into the overall strategic plan but might have different aspects that are not in the official strategic plan. And the group will work in January 2020 to review and make any amended changes to the strategic plan.
You skipped the item about selecting new, adding.
Excuse me. If you will see in your handout, item C2, subcommittees will select and submit 1 to 3 strategies that they propose to be added to the existing strategic plan. So if there are existing strategies that are missing that were not incorporated in the poverty and homelessness strategic plan back in 2016, then the subcommittees have an opportunity to suggest items to be added as priorities.
Questions for Alex?
Is there an ability to amend it during discussion or make an alternate proposal in terms of certain aspects of this? Or should we have that before it's moved? I'd like to make a request for something to happen with the Strategic Planning Committee in regards to portions of the strategic plan that would be needed to be considered or looked at before October, such as some of our winter strategy items that are not being put forward due to some of our immediate needs that actually meet forward with contracting, such as the 20 extra safe parking program spots, such as further expansions for people who need respite, and some of the winter or emergency weather beds as opposed to the year-round beds, which we're covering with TAC.
Go ahead, Dan.
Well, yeah, I think that's a discussion we absolutely need to have. I just don't know if it needs to be part of the strategic plan per se, since I mean, the plan is about, several years, not just this winter.
Yes, sir.
And certainly the strategic plan should include things like that, but we need to have that. I agree with you. We don't want to wait until January to have that discussion. So I would just suggest, rather than trying to hurry up the strategic plan to accommodate that, we just need to deal with those issues.
Yes, sir. I was just requesting that maybe the Strategic Plan Committee meet in September to give some time-sensitive recommendations for when that October group meets, so that way we can make sure that we're in alignment. It took Camp 99 happening and then disembarking for us to get 10 spots for the safe parking program when we've had a request for 40 of them for the last 5 years.
I'm not sure the Strategic Planning Committee is the right spot.
Fair enough.
I think that these are tactics. I think those tactics need to fall back onto our committees to make those happen. The strategic plan is a broad base, and those tactics will come under that.
So let's make sure that happens, though. So
Yes.
who in September can we?
Shelter and support.
Can we make sure that that committee meets in September
Yes,
and works on
yes.
this, so that we're not caught?
That's on, and Commissioner Farr, who's not here today, had requested that be on the agenda.
Why don't we do this, Chris, because why don't we we've had that discussion, and why don't we make sure that I'll follow up, and you can follow up to make sure that we get those meetings held before October, well before October 1.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other questions for Alex or about the strategic planning process? If not, I guess stay tuned. Is that correct? All right.
Can I?
Yes, please.
I know I'm request. We'd made a proposal last November that went to Shelter and Board of Housing Committee, and as far as we know, it's never been addressed. So we would like that. There was a proposal by the Youth Homelessness Solution Work Group last November that this committee, this body, adopt a resolution that from the months of October through February for homeless youth, there will be some sort of shelter for youth to access showers and a warm place to stay. And that moved to the subcommittee
And it
for
didn't get out.
work planning and scope of work, and we've not heard back. So
I will.
if that could be
I'll
part of the
get to
winter
that.
strategies conversation, it would be a really good match.
So is that committee going to be on Bob's plate?
Yes.
So now that we have Bob in place,
There you go, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
will be the next discussion.
Yeah, okay.
And one of the things I want to mention, and I want to give Chris in particular some credit and carry it forward, and also Bob, is that staff has been working with Carry It Forward in looking at how to accommodate the use of the armory and some additional Conestogas that would be available sometime during this season. So there are activities that are going on, as well as our Public Works Department is looking at putting 3 Conestogas at the fairgrounds, the City of Eugene, the court program, and EPD, has put 3 Conestogas out at the fire department. So there are a number of activities going on to find additional safe spots for folks, but there's additional more work to be done. So I just wanted people to know that there is work going on, as well as the continuation of supporting the 200 beds at Dusk to Dawn and the additional services at the Lindholm Center for this.
So I just want to echo what I'm hearing and just my concern, because I know that particular committee has a lot on its plate. And just concerned that we get both of these addressed in a timely fashion. I don't know what else we can do except just take note. And I guess I'm looking to you, Bob, to really provide leadership on both of those issues to make sure that we really address those concerns and we can develop something.
What are the barriers with getting the armory, utilization of the armory? I really don't know, but it seems like we have opportunities and we can never quite.
Well, no, we are closing in on having a contract with Carry It Forward, and it would be a long explanation, but the armory is going to. Maybe Chris, maybe you want to say sort of what the vision is for what will be happening there.
Carry It Forward is currently going to be using the armory for emergency distribution of supplies out in the field to help store special needs for both our camp cleanups, because we do a humane camp cleanup in order to help preserve equipment that has been traditionally just left by trash cans while people go to jail, or has been impounded and then not stored with respect or dignity. We are working with several members of our unhoused community to provide a actual supportive environment where they can get back on their feet, and so a lot of it's doing things for our community. We do laundry service for all of the rest stops in our community, as well as unhoused people who are in our community who are in the hospital, special needs like that. And so this property, while it has its barriers, is going to be a safe, dry spot for us to be able to do operations out of. Due to the complexities of the old building, it's not going to be able to be used for any kind of sheltering on site. And as such, it has very limited capacity for that. It's not going to be a navigation center, but more of an operations deployment center with ability for trainings and work sessions to be better able to engage our people where they're at.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? Strategic planning? All right, well, thank you. Like I said, stay tuned, we'll have more, and I know Bob will, like Dan said, I know Bob will be on this with you guys, and we'll get this thing moving forward. At least get some answers to some things. Thank you. Bob, you're up. You talk about improving the Lane County homeless service system.
Thank you. So my report is really predicated on the work that this community has done for over a year and culminated in the shelter feasibility study, also fondly known as the TAC report. And my role at this point, having been on the job for, tomorrow will be my 6th week, and I've lived now in Oregon for 7 weeks, is really learning about what makes this system go. And for me, in terms of my approach to learning about that, a big part of it has to do with who are the people that compose of our system of care? Who are the organizations and the staff that really make it work? And from the study and research that was done in the TAC report, as well as talking not only with folks around this table, many of you I've had the pleasure to spend some time with, and also with our staff that Steve Minnell has put together over the years, I would agree with much of what the TAC report has indicated. And I think the things that I'm really focused on is how do we build better coordination and collaboration between our organizations. One of the things that's pretty apparent, and I've had many of you say this to me, so it's not a surprise, but maybe out loud, is we acknowledge that many of our organizations in our work is siloed. And the communities where I come from, and primarily in Southern California, have developed better coordinated efforts, not only in terms of outreach, in terms of coordinated entry and assessment, in terms of service provider coordination that happens formally as well as informally. That is my experience and the vision that I think that this community wants to get to. And we know that not only are people suffering because of the system that is in place, we also know that from objective measures, we don't perform that well. The recent State of Oregon shelter study that the TAC group also did, there's a one page that shows metrics for our counties throughout the state, and we're at the top of the list in ways that are not very becoming. Our performance is lacking. And I attribute that to several factors. And one thing that I don't hear a lot of talking about, but I informally when I ask people about that, I think in large measure this community is still suffering from the demise of the timber industry. Yes. And its very deep impacts into people's experience and also the ability of local agencies and government to respond to that. I talk about how when we look at problems, our culture, American culture, often focuses on the individual. And we're so focused on individual responsibility and how the individual can take accountability for their actions that we miss what I call mezzo and macro factors that contribute to why so many individuals are having such a difficult time. So what that means is, especially in terms of the solutions to homelessness, when we talk about housing in particular, we know that we have a long way to go. And even if let's say we had the 350 permanent supportive housing units tomorrow, that they were leased up, we would still have a huge way to go. I saw the report, I believe it was from the City of Eugene's analysis of their housing needs assessment that is from the planning period of, 2012 to 2030. Something like 15,000 new units need to be added to the existing inventory of housing stock to meet the projected demand. So we know from the start that the reality is the emperor has no clothes in that we don't have enough resources to solve the problem. I was involved in the effort in Orange County, California, to write the 10-year plan to end homelessness. You all probably were involved in those 10-year planning efforts too. I was on that committee that wrote that, and the thing that we didn't say out loud was that we weren't ready to address the fact that we don't have enough housing. So this is the challenge that we have as a community. What it means is, what can we do with the limited resources we have? And how do we acknowledge that our best effort is really trying to prioritize and to target the populations that the community has decided that where we want to focus these resources. So that's really what I see a big part of my job will be to coordinate outreach. Our outreach right now occurs, but it's not formally coordinated and works in silos. It's to have better systems of diversion or rapid resolution, as we like to call it in-house, coordinated entry and assessment, all the pieces, the 8 recommendations in the TAC report that kind of fall under my work. So, and much of that is really getting all of the stakeholders around the table together. And so I've been talking with some of you and have been planning with others to how do we get this TAC, these recommendations kicked off. Staff has been asking, and committee members have been asking, when do we start seeing this movement? So some of you, there's a group of about 80 folks that I want to invite to a 2-day event coming up in October, Thursday and Friday, October 10th and 11th. That will include people with lived experience, elected officials, the business sector, service providers, law enforcement, all the stakeholders around in this community, residents that have a vested interest in this problem. And we're going to take a look at those recommendations. We're going to also take a look at how we work together. And we're going to come up with these limited solutions that we have. How do we prioritize the resources and efforts so that we help the people that we can help? I wish I had an answer that said we're going to solve homelessness, we're going to end homelessness in Lane County in 3 years. We're going to get closer, but I think we have to acknowledge that there are larger factors that will help solve this problem at the federal and state level that are currently not here. The local community cannot solve this problem on its own. We have tremendous passion and service providers and public administrators and community members who want to be a part of the solution, but we also need additional resources. So in terms of how do we improve our system, I'm here to work with you. We cannot do this, Lane County cannot do this work by ourselves. Neither can the service provider community, neither can electeds, neither can the business sector. This is a community effort, and my hope and my aspiration is that in those 2 days, we can have some very honest conversations about how we got to this place, how we move forward, and how we have a common message that we can articulate to the community so sorry for the sermon. Part of my background is as a preacher. I was trained as a preacher back in the day. And so, yeah, yes. So I'm actually preaching to the choir, but sometimes you need to organize a choir, right? And so that's part of my role too, to help organize a choir. Thank you. There you go.
Well, that sounds great. And that'll be in October.
Thursday and Friday, October 10th and 11th at the Village Green. Right? Did I say that right? Village Green in Cottage Grove.
So look for more information about it.
More information to come, and save the date.
Any questions for Bob? No? All right. Well, if not, I'm going to attempt to wrap up. We've had a lot of good discussion here today and a lot of good things going on. We've had some tremendous committee reports, and the committees are well engaged, and that's great. And thank you for all of your hard work. We're going to make sure that Bob connects with both Susan and Chris and make sure that we get a couple of answers to some pretty pressing issues that we're going to need to have answered here pretty quickly. We've got a strategic planning process that's on its way, and we'll have more information about that soon. Like I said, I just want to thank everybody for their hard work, because this is time away from your regular jobs, and I know this is part of some of our regular jobs, but it takes a lot of time and commitment to move things as far as we have so far. And I'm looking forward to having that strategic plan adjusted based on some new information and new needs in the community. So anyway, anybody else want to add something? If not, I'm going to open up to the public comment period. If not, I think we have one person that wants to speak, and that's Wayne.
There's another sheet.
Oh, there's a second sheet?
No, I'm the second sheet. There's a first.
Oh, there's a first sheet.
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah. Well, at least I'm not, I missed this. Great, thank you. All right, Larry, Abel, you want to sit up here? Be great.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Larry Abel. I want to talk about the TAC report implementation and how it's going. I'm on the Lane County Budget Committee, and in May, Lane County allocated $155,000 for salaries for, I guess, the so-called housing czar, plus two other people that Steve Manila just hired. And Bob, you're one of those, and I was very impressed to hear you and hear about what you're working on, because those are really important things. So the county allocated $155,000, and the point, Steve Mokrahysky has said that I guess it's supportive, whatever the title is now, person would start July 1st. Well, we're in August, whatever it is, and really nothing's happened. Wayne Martin and I talked to Pat Farr a couple of months ago about doing a national search for someone who had done this in another community. And Pat was on board with that. That certainly hasn't happened. I talked to the city council in June, I think. The city has set aside $1,900,000 for to end homelessness, to deal with it, and yet they had not allocated salaries for these positions. And the mayor emailed me the next day and said the reason was because they didn't get job descriptions from the county. That's hasn't happened because it turns out that there was an RFP, and they're going to hire a contractor. It closed originally on August 2nd, then it was extended for 2 weeks, and now it closes August 16th. I have no idea when this person will actually start. And I'm thinking, because they extended it for 2 weeks, they really didn't get much of a response originally. The RFP, by the way, I just want to point out, it talks about the point of time homeless count, but they gave the statistics, can't talk, the numbers from 2018, which had 1,642 people, rather than 2019, which has 2,165 people. So anyway, in summary, I'm really disappointed with the process so far, and I just hope the city council and county commissioners can get it together and do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any discussion among the members? Here, I think we can
I
discuss
think
it.
Wayne's going to talk to the same.
Oh, is he? Okay.
That's my hunch.
And I can update.
I'll just say good afternoon.
Hi, Wayne.
Somebody got that wrong. I'm Wayne Martin, retired pastor, UCC. Oh, hi. I wanted you to be aware of something that's been happening over the last 3 months. In May, I happened to meet Peter Chabon at a homelessness work group of the Human Resources Council. And I felt that he was a very open-minded, open-ended kind of person who might have ears to hear. And, you know, I'm drawn to that. And so it turns out he is, and he was, and he is. And I wondered if he wanted to actually meet with 10 or 11 unhoused people and just ask them what might be helpful and phase that into the TAC report. We had that meeting, and both Peter and Reagan were there. That was in June, and he wanted to meet again. And we met again the second time, and he brought some job descriptions because he was so impressed. He felt this may be a group of people we could actually put on our outreach workers team and get part-time employment status. They were excited. There were application forms that were filled out. They were brought back at our third meeting, which was the middle of July. And the meetings had grown. We advertised them well at the dining hall. So the third meeting had about 32 people, about 24 homeless. And the next meeting had 35 people, about 26 homeless. And Reagan, bless her heart, has been present at these meetings as well, and very helpful. I'd like to involve the county now. I'd like to have, I think you would find it beneficial to observe one of these meetings and take part, and maybe even be given an opportunity to be introduced. That next meeting is today at 4 o'clock. Take a look at your calendars. It'd be nice to have maybe 2 or 3 of you there. You were there at one, weren't you, Alex? At the beginning? Or did I make that up? The very beginning.
And where is?
They're held at the Methodist Church in the social hall. So I may have been wrong, Alex, sorry. In any event, I urgently desire that you come, sort of experience it, and be better aware of it and make use of it. It's quite exciting.
Thanks, Wayne. All right, anybody else like to speak? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing.
We're going to respond.
Well, let me get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, would you like to respond to it?
Well, I just wanted to give an update on the process of putting in place some of the pieces around implementing the TAC report. Since the joint session that we had with the county commissioners and the city council, city and county staff have met at least once a week, every Wednesday morning, to work on different aspects of the implementation. So, you know, we've hired 2 of the 3 positions that Larry Abel spoke of. The systems initiative manager, the decision was to put that out for a personal services contract rather than a county position. And so that solicitation was put out, and then the solicitation was extended, and a committee will meet after the close on the 16th, and will screen the applications for that work, and then interviews will be scheduled with the city manager and the county administrator. So all of those pieces are going together. And then, Bob spoke to some of the work that he is engaged in, and part of that work has also been coordinating with Peter around looking at the implementation of the outreach portions of that work. City Council met before their recess. The Eugene City Council met to approve $1.9 million worth of support for a sprung structure shelter and for outreach and other elements that are outlined in the TAC report. The city and the county, there's a charter, a draft charter that's been put together. It is almost complete. Intergovernmental agreement for cost sharing between the city of Eugene and Lane County for the positions and some of the efforts that we're talking about. So the infrastructure, the commitment and the infrastructure is being put in place. I would use Bob's hiring as an example of getting in place the capabilities to pull together what we need to implement the TAC report. So maybe didn't happen as quickly as county administrator mentioned during the budget process that we'd get somebody hired by July 1. But I think the process should be complete by the end of this month, and then depending upon the engagements of whoever they hire, somebody will be on board soon. So I think we're well underway, and I think the commitment is there from the city of Eugene and the county to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other comments? Chris?
Just want to say thank you to both the individuals who spoke. The process is long, it is weary, and some of the numbers have to be the year before or whatnot. This last year, this body approved the winter strategies, which uses the real-time numbers for the winter point-in-time count. So as we look forward, moving into our winter strategies, I implore people who work with providers, who work with unhoused people, to reach out and speak to the real numbers and try and find models that will actually help provide for the current need, while the county and the city works with data that they got last year, but have to work through that process. It's very tedious and it's very hard, and it's very disheartening when we have people falling, waiting for the systems. But we have to build a structure that people can depend on. We have to build the trust, and part of that's doing it right. And so while it's slow, we are trying as hard as we can.
Any other comments, thoughts? If not, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all. Thank you all for